Great, and we're live. Welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, all the way from San Francisco, California, or the Bay Area, California, I should say, I have CRISTEN Torrey. And CRISTEN, you're the Director of Research at Figma, and you have led a research team to create a collaboration report, which we're going to dive into in a second. But I want to start the conversation by asking, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
Well, I work from home exclusively out of the Bay Area. Figma is a very remote friendly company. I'm lucky enough to have a dedicated room in my house that I use for my home office. And I do that primarily because I like to shut the door on dishes and other things that might be distracting around my home. And I like to keep a very serene physical environment around me.
Ooh, what does serene mean to you?
I just mean I'm the type of person when I start my day that I clear my desk off
Mhm.
and I dust it, and I love to have like nice smelling things in the room. This is one of the benefits of remote work. You don't bother your coworkers with
Like
strange
orange
essential
scents and
oil. Yes. And I just get to do that here because this is I'm the only one that I get to make happy in my physical environment here.
I love it. So before we started recording, we said that Figma was an in-person company before the pandemic. Did you have an office then before the pandemic?
No, I did not. I went into San Francisco. I live a little bit outside of it every single day. And so my commute has changed radically.
Right. And so you went into an office though in San Francisco
Yes.
every day. Oh, I see. And I would love to ask about the adjustment that you had from actually working in the office, like as a main way of working, to actually going to home. What were some of the challenges that you faced when you made that transition?
Yeah, I think it was, it's a mixed bag, like many people say. I think the part that I struggled with was as a researcher, I'm like to watch people. I'm a people watcher. I like to watch, even through a conference room window, you're like, oh, they're having a great time. Those people are working on something. There's a lot of peripheral awareness that you get in an office. And I think that's something that I miss a little bit, right? Where you're just interacting with people through your screen, you're like, what are people doing over there? So
Yeah.
that's something that I have struggled a little bit with.
Well, yeah, and fair enough. I mean, that kind of information, you get so much without realizing how many of your senses are going off when things are happening around you. Yeah, that is the benefit of working together in an office. So I want to dive into Figma a little bit because Figma is making some big splashes and is becoming more and more popular, which is really exciting to see. A lot of my friends and colleagues use Figma. We used it for my website when we redesigned my website. So I was a big fan to start with. But Figma on the website, it describes itself as a design platform for teams who build products together. And there's sort of a sister product, Fig Jam, which is the whiteboard that goes along with it. So like before you're ready to design, when you're sketching things out, you've got the whiteboard in place, and then you move to Figma to actually put a real structure in place to the thoughts. So I'd love to hear about you're the director of research for Figma. What does that mean exactly?
Mm. Well, the research team at Figma is responsible for creating and facilitating a dialogue with Figma's customers so that we can make better decisions. So I think I kind of take it a very broad lens. Everyone on my team is dedicated in a slightly different area or space across the company. So some people will work with individual product teams. Some people will work with particular marketing efforts and partner really closely with those folks of all different functions to make sure that we are connecting to customer needs at the right time and place. It's a super fun job that has really like exploded in the past couple of years as companies have really thrived on making sure they're really connected to what their customers are telling them.
Indeed, as sort of the agile methodology gets more popular and widespread, and of course, when you're building products, it is it's key to talk to the end users. It's the only way to build what people want, right? Is you have to talk to them. So yeah, I can see it being a very exciting position. Plus, you get to be the bridge between the customers and the technical team and the sales team. You get to see all aspects of the company. So I can imagine that being a really fun role. Now, your team has come out recently with a collaboration report. Tell me a little bit about the background behind this report and why you decided to write it.
Yeah, I think it started with hearing from designers and all the other functions that are part of the product development process, and hearing their frustration and how they were talking about their workflows. I think on one hand, they would talk about these incredibly powerful moments of cross-functional collaboration. And they would talk about how important it was that Figma was such a critical tool for them in that process, because Figma allows anybody on the product team to get right into a design file and to co-create together. And so they would be like, oh, this just really unblocked me, or it unlocked me, and there was some huge aha. So there was obviously something super special about it. And then at the same time, there is this sense that people are starting to be overwhelmed by the amount of feedback they're getting, by the coordination work that's involved in connecting all of these functions across the company. And it's starting to feel burdensome at the same time. And so that's where you get these kind of statements like too many cooks in the kitchen. And,
Right. It's like
I just want to
collaboration
go back
gone
to being,
wild.
yeah, totally. I want to just go back to being a designer, right? Is what there's something that's like starting to feel, yeah, just harder, right? And something that's missing. And so that to me, but that was the start of it. I was like, oh, there's something really juicy here. I think we're using one word, but we're talking about a lot of different things, and some of them are really working well for us, and some of them are not.
Right. So it's like all of a sudden with the ability to I mean, basically what you're doing is you're giving the ability for cross-functional teams to co-create designs together. And when that happens, you get cross-functional teams co-creating designs together, and it is overwhelming. It's like too much information. Just like Slack was really great replacing email, and then all of a sudden it's too many messages, right? It's just like
Yep.
you just get a wave. So how do you, well, I do want to know how to solve it, but let's take a step back and I want to understand what is then good collaboration? Because clearly if we can have good collaboration, but if we have too much of it, then it goes back. There's like a curve, right? It goes back to not being good collaboration. So what is the sweet spot? What is good collaboration?
Yeah, this is exactly the question that the collaboration report was trying to unpack. And I think rather than thinking about like, well, what's the right amount, and what is too much and what's too little, it's like what kind, what are the most productive types of collaboration, and where do we want to spend our time and investment. And so we did this research by first just listening to people over a period of 2 weeks on what types of things they were doing with other people. We generated this pretty robust list of here are all the types of activities.
Mhm.
And then to answer this question about which were really good or best, right? We used a survey to say which of those behaviors were driving good outcomes for the team. So trying to really quantitatively understand which were drivers. And the five that really spiked in this analysis, I thought were super interesting. So one is co-creation, which we already talked about, being able to really just get in there together and work things out. The second one was rapport, knowing your team as human beings. I thought that was super interesting. role clarity, knowing what everyone is good at and where they should be involved. Major pain point for people right now. Feedback, being able to get good feedback and a large quantity of feedback when they need it. And then reflection, being able to adjust. And really critically, when we asked about this, we asked people if their teams were not just noticing what was working, but able to change.
Okay, so could you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah,
That's super interesting.
the reflection piece.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think this is one of my my favorite takeaways from the report. But when we were interviewing people, teams across the board do have meetings on their calendars that say things like retro, right? Everybody, it's a very common thing that people will engage in. But I don't think that in and of itself is enough, right? You can have something on your calendar that says retro, and then when you talk to people about it, they're like, nothing ever happens. Nobody shares
Really?
their thoughts. Yeah. Does that surprise you? Tell me more.
It does surprise me only because I feel like we have this time set aside in our calendar. And
Right.
then why are these meetings then not productive? Are they not being facilitated well? Is there not psychological safety on the team? Do people feel not, or does nothing ever happen with the feedback that's given? Nobody, is it accountability? So immediately I start to dive into, well, we have this space set aside. What are we doing in that
Absolutely.
space?
It's all those things. It's not having the psychological safety that people feel like they can raise the issue. It's then not having the facilitation and then accountability afterward. There's, maybe they don't feel empowered to change those things, or nothing has happened in the past. This is something that we have thought a lot about from the FigJam product perspective, because a lot of people do run reflection activities in whiteboard tools, obviously. And so it's like, what types of things will help people, one, just feel a sense of rapport to begin with when they come into a space like this? What makes it feel okay and safe? What tools can facilitate these conversations more effectively? And then how do you close these out in ways with like direct action, right? Where it's very easy to throw a bunch of stuff on a board, but
Yeah.
then extracting like, we're going to do this and we're going to do this, and this person's going to be responsible for this piece of it, is super important for people to feel like, okay, the thing we want people to leave with is our team as a whole responds to its own needs and improves itself, right?
Right. Right. And that there's accountability, which is important.
Mhm.
I think, it's a scary word, but there's a craving for it. If you just get fed an endless bucket of tasks and nobody cares if they're getting done or not, or how well or they're just assuming it's good, that's not very motivating for most people, I would say. So having somebody checking in and just seeing how it's going. And I must say for myself, I have a business coach, and every week we choose one, we call it our big lever. What's the big lever for the week? What am I going to push on that helps drive me to my goal? And so we set the big lever, and it is um, surprising how driven I am knowing that I'm going to be checking in next week with somebody who's just going to ask me, did I do my big lever? He doesn't care really or not if I did it or not, but the fact that I'm checking in really drives me to do it. So I can imagine on a team that if you're going to do something, you want to have some sort of a coach to facilitate. But I digress. I mean, I can see how this is each one of these behaviors in collaboration, the co-creation, the rapport, the role clarity, the feedback, the reflection, all of this feeds into good collaboration. One of the things that I really loved in your report were the relatively simple collaborative practices that led to better products. You actually put down various survey items and a percentage of how it impacted The product development. So for instance, the first one, the one that had the most impact was our team has the right success criteria. Those are metrics or KPIs. And then the next one, just to give people some examples, the leaders of my organization set clear goals. Can you describe what these are and how they're meant to be used?
Yeah, so the ones that you spoke about just now, I think those ones are slightly more organizationally controlled, right? So there's some of those pieces that are, my organization sets clear timelines. There's sort of success metrics, that sort of thing. And I actually wanted to include those side by side with some of these things like rapport in order to have something to compare it to. So my concern was that if I came back and said, oh, reflection matters, rapport matters, and people would say, compared to what? And it'd be like, well, compared to feedback or compared to something else.
Right.
So I wanted to use something that felt like almost the gold standard of product success drivers, right? Where people are like, well, of course you have to start with success metrics, and have something to compare it to. And so I think the big takeaway for me there was that these things that I just mentioned, those 5 collaboration behaviors, just really equivalent in terms of impact to those, leadership level or org level actions.
Wow, love it. Love it. And in fact, one of the big things that's happened during the pandemic is people talking about I'm jumping to rapport, people talking about the lack of personal connection. But I feel like if we have co-creation and if we have role clarity and the feedback and the reflection, all of that adds also to personal connection as well. Personal connection is not just about having fun together, right? Like good collaboration also lends itself to personal connection on a team, like how we feel about our team and how much we like working with them, a huge part of that. Why is collaboration so hard? Seems obvious after we went over all these factors, like you have to have all these things in place, but like, why is it that we're struggling? It seems kind of, I mean, I don't want to say it seems obvious. It's not obvious, but it seems like common sense when you see it like this. Like, oh yeah, okay, I understand. So
Hmm.
why do we struggle?
Why is it? I think there's a lot of really natural tensions, in collaboration. There's a strong need for people to want to show unique value, to want to have their expertise recognized, and they also want to contribute and be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. People very much want to be connected to conversation that's happening. They want to be involved in a bunch of stuff, but it's quite overwhelming.
Yeah,
You need solo focus time. um there's a lot of these things where they're all need to happen in balance. And I think, at least in the product development space that I'm most familiar with, a lot of this stuff is not very routine. So every project has a little bit of, like, there's always a wrench. There's always stuff that gets thrown at you, and it sort of resists the idea of being like very templatized.
mhm, mhm.
So I think you're always struggling to find that balance. And I think that's when it feels hard. And I think that's why some of these 5 collaboration behaviors end up being, I think that's why reflection pops out. I think that's why rapport pops out, because I think exactly like what you were saying, if you have those, you can weather a lot. Like, there's a resilience that underlies them.
Totally, totally. It's like the baseline. Everything else sort of floats on. It's not that it's less important, it's just that the function somehow it floats. That's at least my metaphor that that I'm
Mhm.
coming up for there. Yeah, indeed. Indeed. And relationships are hard. Working together is hard. We see that everywhere. I mean, you volunteer for any organization or do something in your neighborhood, you're always, working with other people is just inherently hard. So just, yeah, okay. But we have to work on teams, and the better teams that we have, the better products, the more fun we have, the better products that we make. So it's all worth really striving for. I want to ask specifically about your team at Figma, because you were working together in person before the pandemic, and now it's a hybrid way of working. So some people can be remote, some people can go to the office. I guess I'll start with how many people are now using the office? If you know, like how many either on your team or just in general at Figma?
I don't happen to know for the organization as a whole. On my team, which is still under 10 people, I think there are two folks who come very regularly to the office.
Mhm.
And then some people work fully remote, and then some people are sort of in this hybrid mode of like, oh, I'll come in sometimes, and not others. And I think for me as a team leader, that means we're all remote, right? That's the primary way that we're going to communicate with each other, and the way that information is going to be exchanged, the way we're going to develop rapport, all of that is virtual. I
Right.
do think it's super important. We've onboarded quite a few people recently, and we're planning in-person get together, by the end of the year. And I do think that periodic just time together in person does help produce the baseline foundational rapport that we've been talking about.
Oh, yeah, fully agreed. I once had an all remote team, and we met once for a retreat in Lisbon. Actually, we rented an Airbnb, like a huge Airbnb with tons of rooms. We were a small team. And after that, the team was never the same, like in a really good way. There was and we'd been a team for years, but there was just something about hanging out, like you said, over a big pile of nachos that just really binds a team together. Super important. So I would love to know, in terms of the transition of how you're all working together, what changed between, like, just functionally in your workflows or maybe the tools that you're using? What changed when you went in person to fully remote? And then what changed again when you went to hybrid?
I think, well, in some ways it was a little bit easier for us because we hadn't, when we went remote at the beginning of the pandemic, I had actually just hired my first two people on the team, and they had only been there like a week. So I think we built our processes and our workflows in the virtual context, and
Ah, okay.
didn't have to do it, a bunch of times.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I think, and this is even before I did this research, but I think what I really strive for is just constant iteration amongst the team. I want my team to feel really open about, look, this isn't working for me and I want to change it. So I think in terms of all of our processes, we just have a routine around doing a quarterly and a half yearly kind of retro around, okay, do we need this meeting anymore? Can someone else own it? Who feels passionate about it? And just, I don't know. I don't want to be the only person that's responsible for culture, right? We're all going to pitch in there.
Rightly so. Culture has to come from everybody. It is the collective behavior of the group that creates a culture. So, indeed.
Totally.
How do you agree as a team on things? Do you have any sort of, like, team agreement in place, or is it all unspoken? How do you document your processes?
Well, a lot of our stuff is documented after workshops in FigJam. So
Mhm.
I've always been a workshop facilitator type of person. And so FigJam has kind of been I'm like, finally, something that everyone at Figma is going to use and like want to hang out with me in. So,
I
um,
love whiteboards, so I
yeah,
totally understand. I'm a
I
huge
think
fan.
for somebody like when you talk about, how do you document decisions on the team, right? From my perspective, my worst nightmare is giving the team a PowerPoint presentation on my pitch to, here's how I want to run things, and just having crickets. That's
Yeah.
like the worst. So I think my approach has always been, okay, let's get into a space together where everyone feels like they can contribute something. They can contribute their ideas, they can give feedback right there. We do, this is our own tool. So you can imagine, like in FigJam, there are stickers, there are highlighters, there are, we just go for it. The boards are kind of lovely. But I think that gives people a stake in what's happening. And so we have things like, I ran a team mission workshop there. And so that's sort of our mission, our success criteria, our goals for the year, our kind of working agreements about what we're gonna invest in right now. So I'm a big believer in that. I think it's important for people to feel like they have a real stake in how their team is run.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and also you're a product that centers around co-creation. And
Yes,
so it would be kind of weird not to have sort of co-creative team process in that way. I mean, it seems like it's in your DNA, like
that's
for
right.
people that would work in that way, indeed. All right. So, a couple last, oh, we're running out of time. I'm noticing. Darn, I have so many questions and so many notes that I've been taking, but we've got to get to the end. So in terms of collaboration, what is it that you would like people to take away from this report that you've written? What is it? What is your takeaway to the audience that's getting this?
I think the thing that surprised me the most, in a good way, was that those five that we've been talking about, co-creation, rapport, role clarity, reflection, feedback, when I look at those, especially compared to all the other types of collaboration behaviors, those five have a lot of relational dynamics. It's not transactional, it's not information exchange, there's not even like systematic process. What I see in those five things is humanness, relationship, sort of an emotional intelligence. And I think that's the takeaway from the research, that those things, which are often not necessarily, they're not always applauded in the way that I think they should be valued, are all directly and quantitatively associated with, a belief from the team that their products are actually better products.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. A belief from the team that their products are better products because of these behaviors that we're instilling. How do you promote these behaviors in a team? I mean, like, okay, we know that this is the keys to collaboration, let's say. Like, how do you promote these behaviors on your team? Maybe I'll say.
Yes, I love that. I think I do have to make it specific, because since we've done this, I've been racking my brain like, how do I change the culture of product development, or, and then I was just like, well, that's a little too
Right, right, right.
start a little smaller, scope down. I think right now, my main go-to, and the experiment I'm trying right now, is to just praise the heck out of people. Everywhere I see it, just make it visible, tell their manager, right? Like, this person turned a team that was struggling into a team that was thriving because they listened to people, reflected on what was happening, and helped that team make changes, and just try to like just make it seen, is the thing I'm trying now.
Right.
And if nothing else, the thing that is really working about it is that it makes people really happy.
Yeah. One of the weird things, it occurred to me when I was working in an office, actually in San Francisco almost 25 years ago now. And one of the things that I noticed is that there was very little showing of appreciation overall. Not because anybody was a bad person or anything. It just wasn't in the culture. It wasn't built into anything. So we celebrated birthdays once a month, But beyond that, like finishing a project or reaching a goal or celebrating a milestone, never done, never done. And so one of the things that I've seen in the virtual space that there's also not a lot of focus on that because, well, we're all busy doing our jobs and reaching out seems like it's just not going to make that big of a difference. But you're right. People really want to be appreciated for work well done or to be seen for the contributions that they're making. I love that.
It's huge. Like you can see people's face light up. And some people are obviously embarrassed by it, and I try to be respectful of, not getting too nuts, but it is really it's joyful. And it's pleasurable to people to feel called out for that.
I bet. One of my friend Abe, who's in Phoenix, he said, if I know that my boss has got my back, the rest is gravy. And so I think it just feels like, if your manager, your team lead has your back and they are promoting you and championing you, that goes a long way for building trust and loyalty on a team and just basic human goodness, I think. And
Yes.
we can all use a little more of that in this world at the moment. So, Kristen, we are out of time. I really appreciate the value that you added to this conversation today and all the tips. As for the last question, where can people learn more about you and about the collaboration report? I will, of course, link to it in the show notes, but let's tell the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'd be happy to check in with folks and answer questions. You can find the collaboration report at figma.com/collaboration report.
Easy enough. Love it. Thank you so much for your time today, Kristen. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
And until next time, everybody, be powerful.